Long before recorded history, in the frozen wilderness of ancient Europe, a tribe of hunters prepares for a dangerous bison hunt. Their chief, Tao, leads the group as they drive a massive herd toward a cliff using a barrier of sharpened spears. Most of the animals plunge over the edge, but three remain behind. One furious bull charges straight at Tao's teenage son, Keda. The beast brutally gores him, drags him toward the cliff's edge, and nearly finishes him off before Tao strikes it with his spear. Keda tumbles into the darkness below. 1 week earlier, Keda and the other young members of the tribe are tested on their spearcrafting skills. Only Keda and his close friend Kappa succeed, earning the right to join the final hunt before winter. As part of their coming-of-age ceremony, they endure a ritual beating meant to teach them that pain is a constant companion in life. The tribe's shaman blesses them beside the fire, welcoming them into manhood. Later that night, Keda overhears his parents speaking quietly. His mother, Ro, worries that Keda is too gentle and guided by compassion rather than aggression. Tao, however, insists that his son must learn to hunt and carry the responsibilities of the tribe. At dawn, the hunting party sets out after emotional farewells. Ro secretly gives Keda an extra piece of fur for protection. The group follows an ancestral trail marked by stone carvings and hand-painted symbols that guide them across the land. Along the journey, they encounter another hunting group led by Tao's longtime friend Zai, who is mourning the recent loss of his own son. The two groups decide to travel together. Keda repeatedly attempts to prove himself, but his efforts fall short. He fails to start a fire and hesitates when asked to kill a captured boar, deepening his shame and frustration. One evening while resting by the fire, the hunters hear movement in the darkness. They prepare to fight, but when nothing appears, they relax too soon. A cave lion suddenly bursts from the shadows and drags Kappa away, killing him. The following morning, the hunters build a stone cairn to honor Kappa's spirit before continuing onward. Days later, the group shelters inside a large cave. Tao has Keda tattooed with star patterns, symbolizing a path that will always guide him home. Eventually, the hunters discover bison tracks, leading into the ambush scene at the beginning. After Keda falls, Tao desperately attempts to climb down to reach him, but the others restrain him, believing Keda is already dead. Overcome with grief, Tao stays at the cliff's edge, while the rest of the hunters prepare to transport the meat. Zai's group departs, and Tao's party camps one final night. The next morning, Tao builds a second cairn in Keda's memory before forcing himself to move on. Much later, a vulture lands on Keda's motionless body, pecking at him. Keda awakens, fights the bird off, and realizes he is alive but severely injured. His leg is broken, and escape seems impossible. A storm rolls in, flooding the area below. With no other option, Keda releases his grip and plunges into the water. He wakes the next day, battered but breathing. He drinks from a puddle, fashions a splint for his leg, and painfully climbs back toward the top. When he reaches the edge, he finds the cairn built for him. Furious and heartbroken, he destroys it, realizing he has been abandoned and must survive alone. Keda begins a solitary journey. He eats insects, drinks from any water source he can find, and sleeps in trees to avoid predators. One day, a wolf pack surrounds him. As he climbs a tree, a wolf bites his leg, and Keda stabs it before reaching safety. The wolves eventually leave, except for the wounded one lying below. Keda prepares to kill the injured wolf but hesitates. He cannot bring himself to end its life, yet he also cannot ignore its suffering, as its cries echo through the forest. Moved by the animal's suffering, Keda chooses compassion over fear. He binds the wolf's jaws shut so it cannot bite, lifts the trembling creature onto his shoulders, and carries it to a nearby lake where he washes the infected wound. Their moment of safety is brief. Hyenas lurk in the distance, forcing Keda to pick the wolf up once more and search for shelter. Eventually, they discover a cave where both can rest without immediate danger. At dawn, Keda finds a stone mortar among scattered bones and crushes plants into a thick paste, creating a crude healing salve. He rubs it onto his swollen leg, while the wolf slowly manages to loosen the bindings around its snout. The animal remains tense but does not attack. Taking this as a sign, Keda cautiously offers it water. After several warning growls, the wolf finally drinks. Keda goes further, using the strip of fur his mother gave him to clean the wolf's wound. He even shares the worms he gathers, though the meager meal barely satisfies either of them. Realizing they cannot survive on insects alone, Keda steels himself to hunt for the first time. Using a rock, he kills a rabbit and, after repeated attempts, successfully starts a fire to cook the meat. When the wolf tries to snatch the food, Keda drives it back, recalling his father's lessons about leadership. He eats first, then tosses scraps to the wolf, establishing a simple order between them. Despite this growing arrangement, the wolf still refuses to be touched. Winter draws closer, and Keda knows he must start moving if he hopes to reach home. He gathers what supplies he can and struggles with the wolf to reclaim his fur pelt before setting off. No matter how often Keda tells the wolf to leave, it continues following him. Eventually, Keda stops fighting it and accepts the animal as his companion. He even trains it to respond to a sharp whistle. Their early hunting attempts together fail miserably, but through trial and error, they learn to coordinate. Soon they are able to bring down small prey with surprising efficiency. Each night, Keda checks his star tattoo to confirm their direction, while the wolf curls up beside him for warmth. Over time, the animal allows Keda to touch it, a quiet sign of trust. After a day spent bathing and fishing in a lake, Keda gives the wolf a name, Alpha. Their journey drags on until winter finally arrives. Snow begins to fall, blanketing the land. One evening, while they eat beside a small fire, a pack of wolves emerges from the darkness. Keda realizes these wolves are Alpha's kin. Understanding the pain of separation, he urges Alpha to rejoin them. The wolf hesitates, then disappears into the pack, leaving Keda alone once more. Blizzards become frequent, slowing Keda's progress. He is haunted by a nightmare in which Tao returns home and tells Ro that their son is dead. Days later, during another storm, Keda spots Alpha and the pack again. He runs toward them, but the ice beneath his feet shatters, plunging him into freezing water. As his gear and his mother's fur float away, Keda claws at the ice with his knife. Alpha lunges forward and pulls him out. From that moment on, they travel together again. That night, Keda clings to Alpha's body, drawing heat from the animal to survive. After several more miles, they discover tracks leading to a small hut. Inside lies a man frozen solid. There is no food, but Keda finds a bow and arrows, which he takes for hunting. Around this time, Alpha begins coughing blood, worrying Keda deeply. Soon, they face danger from two sides. Hyenas trail them from behind, while a violent storm blocks their path. They sprint until they reach a cave, but inside waits a cave lion. The beast attacks immediately. Alpha throws itself into the fight while Keda knocks an arrow, forcing himself to stay calm. He releases the shot and kills the lion, saving Alpha, though the wolf is badly injured. Struggling onward through the storm, Keda spots one of the ancient stone markers of the sacred path. Hope surges within him. That night, the northern lights blaze across the sky, and Keda believes his ancestors are guiding him home. Alpha, however, is weakening. One day, the wolf collapses and cannot stand. Refusing to abandon his friend, Keda lifts Alpha into his arms and continues forward, even as he himself grows weaker and begins coughing blood. Eventually, Keda collapses too. In a dream, he relives the conversation he once overheard between his parents. Tao had told Ro that Keda was stronger than he realized. The memory ignites something inside him. Keda wakes with renewed determination. He hoists Alpha onto his shoulders and pushes through the storm until, at last, the outline of his tribe's camp appears. The hunters stare in disbelief. Tao rushes forward, overcome with emotion, embracing his son and telling him how proud he is. Keda and Alpha are taken into a tent to be treated. After Keda eats and rests, the shaman examines Alpha and makes a startling discovery. Alpha is female and she is in labor. The wolf gives birth to healthy pups, and the tribe welcomes them as part of their community. Years later, once the pups have grown into strong adult wolves, they are paired with hunters and taken along on the tribe's next great hunt before winter. Analysis: before cities existed, before languages were formed, before humans ruled the world, there was only wilderness. Cold, silent, unforgiving. And in that brutal world, survival didn't depend on strength alone, it depended on connection. Most prehistoric movies focus on massive beasts, violent tribes, and non-stop action. But this story chooses a different path. It asks a simple yet powerful question. What if humanity's greatest evolution wasn't a weapon, but a friendship? At its core, this film is not about conquering nature. It's about a frightened boy and a dying wolf who discover that staying alive is easier when you're not alone. No heroic speeches, no grand armies, no chosen one prophecy, just hunger, fear, pain, and the slow, fragile birth of trust. What makes this movie stand out is its intimacy. It strips storytelling down to its purest form. A journey, a bond, a transformation. By the end of this experience, you're not thinking about prehistoric history. You're thinking about what it means to grow up, what it means to protect, and what it means to find family in the most unexpected place. Today, we're diving deep into a survival tale that is quiet, emotional, and surprisingly powerful. This is not just a movie about the past. This is a story about the very first friendship that may have shaped the future of humanity. Let's begin. Released in 2018, this film is a prehistoric survival adventure directed by Albert Hughes and led by Kodi Smit-McPhee in a physically demanding, largely wordless performance. The story is set during the last ice age, a time when humans lived in small tribes, hunted massive animals for survival, and faced extinction on a daily basis. There are no modern cities, no technology, no comfort. Only snow-covered landscapes, endless forests, and creatures capable of killing a human in seconds. The movie follows a teenage boy from a hunter tribe who is taken on his first major hunt, a ritual meant to prove that he's ready to become a warrior. But everything goes wrong. After a catastrophic accident, the boy is separated from his people and left for dead. Injured, stranded, and completely alone, he must cross hundreds of miles of hostile wilderness to find his way home. Along this journey, he encounters a wounded wolf, an animal that should be his enemy. Instead of killing each other, they form an uneasy alliance, not because they trust one another, not because they want to, but because survival leaves them no other choice. This is a story about two broken creatures trying to stay alive in a world that doesn't care if they succeed or fail. No big exposition dumps, no heavy dialogue. The film communicates through visuals, body language, and raw emotion. It's a simple premise, but inside that simplicity lives a deeply human story about fear, growth, and the origins of companionship itself. This is not a movie about saving the world. It's a movie about surviving one more day, and sometimes that's even harder. On the surface, this movie looks like a simple survival adventure, a boy lost in the wilderness, a dangerous journey home. Predators lurking in the shadows, but beneath that familiar setup, the film is doing something much deeper. Yes, it belongs to the survival genre, but it also quietly lives in the space between. Adventure, drama, and emotional coming-of-age storytelling. This is not about flashy action. It's about endurance, not about domination, but adaptation. At its core, the film explores one central idea. Survival alone is possible, but survival together is stronger. One of the most powerful themes is fear of the unknown. The boy is afraid of nature, afraid of animals, afraid of himself. The wolf is equally afraid of humans. They are natural enemies by instinct, yet the film slowly dismantles that instinct and replaces it with understanding. Another key theme is growth through suffering. The boy doesn't become brave because someone trains him. He becomes brave because pain leaves him no alternative. Every wound, every loss, every cold night forces him to evolve. The film also explores identity. At the beginning, the boy sees himself as weak. By the end, he no longer defines himself by his tribe's expectations. He defines himself by what he has survived. Emotionally, the tone is quiet and restrained. There are no dramatic monologues, no inspirational speeches. The emotion comes from small moments, a shared piece of food, a protective stance, a glance of hesitation. This makes the film feel intimate, personal, almost meditative. As for the target audience, this movie is for viewers who appreciate slow burn storytelling, atmospheric visuals, and emotional depth over constant action. If you're looking for non-stop spectacle, this film may feel slow. But if you're looking for a story that lets silence speak, this movie delivers something rare. A prehistoric story that feels deeply human, and a survival tale that's really about learning how to care. The story begins in a brutal prehistoric world where survival is earned, not given. A teenage boy lives within a hunter tribe that values strength, courage, and physical dominance. But he doesn't fit that image. He's smaller, quieter, less confident. Even his own people see him as fragile. His father, a respected hunter, believes the only way his son can change it is through experience. So the boy is taken on a dangerous bison hunt, a trial meant to turn boys into warriors. At first, everything seems controlled. Hunters surround a massive herd, plans are executed, signals are given, but nature doesn't follow human plans. Panic erupts, the stampede breaks formation, hunters are thrown, animals charge in all directions. During the chaos, the boy is struck and hurled off a cliff. From the tribe's perspective, he is dead, but he survives, broken, bleeding, alone at the bottom of a ravine. When he wakes up, the world has become terrifyingly silent. No tribe. No father, no protection, only endless wilderness. With a shattered leg and limited supplies, the boy makes a choice. Either lie down and die or move forward. He chooses to walk. His journey is slow, painful. Every step is torture. Every night is a gamble. He struggles to hunt, struggles to make fire, struggles even to stay conscious. Eventually, he encounters a wolf caught in a trap. The animal is badly wounded, terrified, desperate. The boy reacts on instinct. He attacks the wolf with a spear, but the wolf doesn't die. Instead, both collapse from exhaustion, two injured creatures staring at each other, waiting to see who makes the next move. Instead of finishing the wolf, the boy leaves. But hunger brings him back. He realizes something important. The wolf is a hunter, a better hunter than he will ever be. If the wolf lives, the boy might live too. He cuts the wolf free, not out of kindness, not out of friendship. Out of necessity, their early partnership is tense. They keep distance. They watch each other carefully. They share food but never trust. Over time, something changes. The wolf helps track prey. The boy offers meat. They sleep near each other. Not close but close enough. The boy names the wolf Alpha, giving the animal an identity, and unknowingly giving himself a companion. As days pass, the boy begins learning. He studies how Alpha hunts, how Alpha stalks, how Alpha waits. He copies these behaviors. Slowly, he becomes more capable, more aware, more confident. They face constant threats, hostile predators, freezing storms, near starvation, deadly terrain. Each danger pushes them closer together. The boy starts protecting Alpha. Alpha starts protecting the boy. They no longer walk as separate creatures. They move as a unit, a pack of two. The boy is no longer just trying to reach home. He is trying to keep Alpha alive too. And in doing so, he discovers something unexpected. He isn't weak. He was simply untested. The wilderness becomes his teacher. Pain becomes his training. Loss becomes his motivation. By the time the distant mountains appear on the horizon, the boy who fell into the ravine no longer exists. In his place stands someone new, not a child, not yet a man, but a survivor. And beside him walks the first friend he ever truly chose. Two species, two enemies by nature, bound by shared suffering, walking toward an uncertain future together. By the time we reach the final act, the journey has already changed everything. The frightened boy from the beginning is gone. In his place stands someone shaped by hunger, pain, and responsibility. But the wilderness has one last test. As the boy and Alpha approach the mountains where the tribe is believed to be, they encounter a massive predator, not just another obstacle, but a final embodiment of the world's cruelty. A living symbol of everything that has tried to kill them. The confrontation is chaotic, brutal, desperate. The boy doesn't fight with confidence. He fights with necessity. Every movement is instinct. Every strike is fueled by the knowledge that if he fails, both of them die. Alpha charges. The predator retaliates. The ground becomes a storm of claws, teeth, and blood. In the chaos, Alpha is badly wounded. The boy manages to kill the predator, but when the dust settles, Alpha lies motionless. For a moment, the boy believes he has lost the only companion who helped him survive, and something important happens here. He doesn't celebrate. He doesn't feel victorious. He grieves, not for an animal, but for a friend. This moment proves the transformation is complete. The boy no longer sees Alpha as a tool for survival. He sees Alpha as family. With nothing else he can do, the boy continues toward the mountains alone. He walks with heavier steps, not just from exhaustion, but from loss. Eventually, he reaches the land of his people. He reunites with the tribe. But the reunion feels different than expected. There is no triumphant speech, no grand ceremony, no proud declaration, because the boy is no longer seeking validation. He already knows who he is. Then something unexpected happens. Alpha appears, scarred, injured, but alive. The wolf limps into view, and in that moment, the boy realizes something extraordinary. Their bond did not end in the wilderness. It survived just like they did. This final image is deeply symbolic. It suggests the birth of an ancient relationship, not master and pet, not owner and animal, but partners. The ending isn't just about one boy returning home. It's about the beginning of a relationship that would reshape human history, the first step toward domestication, the first step toward companionship between species. The movie doesn't spell this out with dialogue. It doesn't need to. The meaning is visual, two survivors, standing together, choosing each other. The deeper message of the ending is simple. True strength isn't proven by domination. It's proven by the ability to care, to protect, to trust. The boy doesn't become a man because he killed something. He becomes a man because he learned how to keep someone alive. And that makes the ending quietly powerful, not loud, not explosive, but deeply human. A prehistoric story with a very modern heart, because even thousands of years later, we still measure our humanity by how we treat those who walk beside us. This movie may look simple on the surface, but beneath that simplicity, it is quietly layered with symbolism, small visual choices, repeated patterns, and subtle storytelling techniques that deepen the entire experience. Let's start with fire. Fire is more than just warmth in this film. It represents knowledge, control, and evolution. Early on, the boy struggles to create fire. He fails repeatedly, and each failure mirrors his inner state, confused, insecure, unprepared. But as he learns, as he adapts, fire becomes easier, more reliable, just like his growing confidence. Every time the boy successfully makes fire, it signals a step forward in his transformation. Next comes blood and scars. Both the boy and Alpha collect wounds throughout the journey, and the film often frames these injuries in similar ways. Close-ups, matching camera angles, parallel moments of pain. This visual mirroring suggests something important. They are evolving together, different species, same path. their scars become physical proof of shared history. Another powerful symbol is color. Early scenes are dominated by cold blues, grays, and whites. The world feels harsh, emotionless, hostile. But as the bond between boy and wolf strengthens, subtle warm tones begin to appear, not suddenly, not dramatically. Just enough to be felt. It's the visual language of emotional warmth entering a frozen world. Then there's naming. When the boy names the wolf Alpha, he isn't just labeling an animal. He is acknowledging individuality, identity. Personhood in prehistoric terms, this is revolutionary. It marks the moment the wolf stops being a predator and becomes someone, a being worthy of recognition. We also see foreshadowing in early wolf behavior. At the beginning of the film, wolves are shown hunting cooperatively, protecting one another, functioning as a pack. This quietly hints at what's coming, not domination, not conquest, but partnership. The film is showing us how wolves already understand cooperation, long before humans learn to share it with them. Another subtle detail, the boy gradually adopts wolf-like behaviors. He crouches when hunting. He moves silently. He observes before attacking. This isn't coincidence. It shows that survival isn't about overpowering nature, it's about learning from it. Perhaps the most important symbolic idea is the absence of spoken language. Without dialogue, there are no lies, no manipulation, no social hierarchy. Communication happens through body language, tone, action, choice. The film suggests that the purest form of connection doesn't require words, only intention. Even the landscape itself becomes symbolic. Wide empty spaces emphasize isolation. Tight cave spaces represent fragile safety. Mountains symbolize both danger and destination. Every environment reflects the emotional state of the journey. Taken together, all these small details quietly reinforce the film's central message. This is not a story about conquering nature. It's a story about aligning with it. Not about becoming the strongest creature, but about becoming the most adaptable. And when you notice these hidden layers, the film stops being a simple survival adventure and starts feeling like a visual poem about how humanity learned its first lesson. We survive better when we survive together. What makes this film even more impressive is how much effort went into making its world feel authentic. Because although the story feels simple, the production process was anything but. One of the most fascinating choices was the creation of a fictional prehistoric language. Instead of using modern English, the filmmakers developed a primitive form of speech based on ancient linguistic structures. The goal wasn't historical perfection. The goal was immersion. They wanted every word to sound unfamiliar, yet emotionally understandable, which is why much of the movie relies more on expression than dialogue. Another major challenge was the physical preparation of the lead actor. He went through survival training that included learning to build fires without matches, practicing spear throwing, studying animal movement patterns, spending extended time outdoors in cold environments. This training wasn't just for realism. It directly shaped how the character moves on screen. You're not watching an actor pretending to struggle. You're watching someone who actually understands exhaustion. The wolf performances are another technical achievement. The production used a combination of real trained wolves, wolf-dog hybrids, subtle visual effects. This hybrid approach allowed the animals to feel alive without relying heavily on CGI. It's why Alpha feels like a real creature, not a digital character. The landscapes also play a huge role. Many scenes were filmed in harsh natural locations, including mountainous and frozen regions of Canada. Temperatures during filming were often extreme. Cast and crew worked in real snowstorms, real wind, real cold. That discomfort translates directly onto the screen. Another interesting fact, the film was originally conceived as a nearly silent movie. Dialogue was added later, but the minimalist approach remained. This explains why so much meaning is carried through visuals, gestures, facial expressions. Camera framing. There are also several deleted or trimmed sequences that focused more heavily on tribal politics and internal conflicts. These were removed to keep the story intimate. The filmmakers wanted the focus to stay on one boy, one wolf, one journey, not a sprawling epic. A subtle detail many people miss is that the wolf's behavior was carefully choreographed based on real ethology studies. Simple things like ear positioning, tail movement, distance from the boy, all change gradually, mirroring how real animals slowly build trust. Nothing happens suddenly, because real trust doesn't happen suddenly. Even the title of the film carries meaning. Alpha doesn't just refer to dominance. It refers to leadership through protection, through responsibility, which ties directly into the boy's transformation. By the end of the film, both the boy and the wolf have become alpha in their own way. Not because they rule, but because they endure. All these behind-the-scenes choices serve one purpose: to make the story feel honest, not flashy, not exaggerated, just raw. And when you realize how much care went into crafting that honesty, you start to see the film differently, not as a simple survival movie, but as a carefully constructed experience, designed to make you feel what it might have been like to be human before humanity fully existed. When people first hear about this film, they often compare it to other survival epics, stories of lone humans battling the wilderness. But while there are surface-level similarities, this movie quietly separates itself from most of its genre peers. Take traditional survival films. Many of them are driven by revenge, or rage, or the desire to defeat nature. Here, nature isn't a villain, it's a reality. The closest comparison is The Revenant. Both films feature brutal environments, minimal dialogue, and protagonists pushed to their physical limits. But where The Revenant is fueled by vengeance, this film is fueled by connection. One is about a man crawling toward revenge. The other is about a boy walking toward belonging. Another common comparison is Apocalypto. Both focus on primal survival. Both rely heavily on visuals instead of dialogue. But Apocalypto is fast, violent, and relentless. This movie is slower, more reflective, less about spectacle, more about emotion. Then there's Quest for Fire, an older prehistoric classic. That film explores humanity's early relationship with technology, fire, tools, primitive communication. This movie explores humanity's early relationship with companionship. Both feel experimental, both feel patient, but they ask different questions. Quest for Fire asks, how did humans learn to control nature? This film asks, how did humans learn to cooperate with it? Compared to modern animal-centered survival stories, this movie avoids fantasy elements. The wolf isn't super intelligent. It doesn't perform impossible feats. It behaves like an animal, a cautious, instinct-driven survivor. That restraint gives the relationship more weight. So what does this movie do better than many survival films? It keeps the scale small. One boy, one wolf, one journey. No subplots, no sprawling cast, no political intrigue. That simplicity creates emotional focus. Where does it fall short? Some viewers may find the pacing too slow. Others may wish for deeper tribal backstory or more historical detail. But those omissions are intentional, because the film isn't trying to explain prehistoric society. It's trying to make you feel prehistoric loneliness. In a genre often dominated by loud suffering, this movie chooses quiet endurance. In a genre obsessed with dominance, this movie chooses mutual dependence, and that choice alone places it in a very different category. Not as a grand survival epic, but as an intimate origin story, not of a hero, not of a civilization, but of a bond that quietly suggests human history didn't begin with conquest, it began with cooperation. When this film was released, it didn't arrive with massive hype, no enormous marketing campaign, no blockbuster expectations, and because of that, it quietly slipped past many viewers. Those who did watch it often walked away surprised. Not because the film was loud, not because it was shocking, but because it was gentle. Many audience members praised the movie's visual beauty, atmosphere, emotional simplicity, and the man and wolf relationship at its core. For a lot of viewers, the bond between the boy and Alpha became the emotional anchor. People connected to the idea of two broken creatures, finding strength in each other. Especially audiences who enjoy slower, more reflective storytelling tended to respond very positively. Critical reactions were more divided. Some critics admired the cinematography and mood. They appreciated the restraint, the minimal dialogue, the visual storytelling. Others felt the plot was too thin, too predictable, or too familiar. Some wanted more historical realism, more tribal politics, more narrative complexity. But here's the interesting part. Over time, the conversation around this film has shifted. It's increasingly mentioned as an underrated survival drama, a movie that wasn't meant to dominate the box office, but was meant to linger quietly in people's minds. It's the kind of film that gains appreciation through discovery, a late-night watch, a recommendation from a friend, a hidden gem status. Not everyone will love it, and that's okay, because this movie isn't designed for everyone. It doesn't chase trends, it doesn't pander, it doesn't try to be flashy. It knows exactly what kind of story it wants to tell, and it tells that story honestly. In a landscape full of loud blockbusters, this film chose to whisper. And for many viewers, that whisper ended up being more memorable than a scream, which is why today, years after its release, it's often discussed with quiet respect, not as a masterpiece, not as a failure, but as something rare. A sincere survival story that dared to be soft in a genre known for brutality. By the time the credits roll, this movie has made one thing very clear. It never wanted to be the biggest survival film, the loudest, or the most explosive. It wanted to be the most honest, and in many ways it succeeds. Let's start with its strengths. The emotional core is strong. The relationship between the boy and Alpha feels earned, not rushed, not forced, built slowly through shared suffering. The visuals are consistently beautiful, wide landscapes, harsh environments, quiet moments of stillness, all working together to create immersion. The lead performance carries the entire film. With minimal dialogue, every emotion has to be communicated through expression and body language, and that challenge is handled impressively. The atmosphere is another major strength. The film knows when to be silent, when to linger, when to let the environment speak. That restraint gives the story weight, but the film isn't perfect. The plot is simple, very simple. Some viewers may want more complexity, more backstory, more world building. The pacing is slow. Deliberately slow. If you expect constant action, this movie will test your patience. And that leads us to the most important question: who is this movie for? This film is for viewers who appreciate character-driven storytelling, atmospheric visuals, quiet emotional journeys, slow-burn survival tales. If you enjoy films that prioritize feeling over spectacle, this one will likely resonate. If you need non-stop action, it probably won't. So here's the final verdict. This is not a prehistoric action blockbuster. It is a small, intimate survival story about fear, growth, and the first fragile steps toward companionship. It reminds us that humanity's greatest achievement may not have been the spear, or the fire, or the wheel, but the moment we chose not to face the darkness alone. And for that reason, this film is worth watching, not because it's perfect, not because it's revolutionary, but because it's sincere. And sometimes, sincerity is more powerful than spectacle. Final recommendation: strongly recommended for fans of atmospheric survival cinema. If you stayed until the end, you didn't just watch a survival story, you witnessed the birth of a bond, and that is something truly timeless. Reviews: this Stone Age adventure tells the story of a teenage hunter who is believed dead after becoming separated from his tribe during a dangerous expedition. Left alone in a brutal prehistoric world, the young survivor must find his way back home, armed with nothing but determination, instinct, and an unexpected companion. Along the journey, he forms a bond with an injured wild wolf he chooses to save, and together they slowly develop a fragile but powerful partnership. It becomes a primal tale of survival, trust, and the earliest roots of the friendship between humans and animals. One of the film's greatest strengths is its visual presentation. Shot across vast, rugged landscapes in British Columbia, the movie captures stunning natural scenery that feels both majestic and unforgiving. Even with minimal dialogue and only loosely translated subtitles, the lead actor communicates a wide range of emotions through body language, facial expression, and raw physical performance. It's impressive how much feeling is conveyed using little more than grunts, gestures, and primitive speech patterns. I'll admit, I went into this film with low expectations. I had heard it wasn't a major theatrical success and even experienced release delays, so it wasn't high on my watch list. Perhaps that worked in its favor, because I ended up enjoying it far more than anticipated. While the plot follows a fairly predictable path, it remains engaging thanks to strong atmosphere, solid pacing, and consistent emotional weight. The heart of the movie lies in the evolving relationship between the boy and the wolf. Their connection doesn't feel forced. It grows out of necessity and mutual dependence. Each helps the other survive in different ways, and over time, their bond becomes genuinely touching. There's also a subtle reveal near the ending that adds another layer to their story, making a second viewing worthwhile for attentive viewers. Strangely enough, despite being released in 2018, I had never heard of this film until watching it in 2023. After sitting through its 96-minute runtime, I can confidently say it was time well spent. The writing and direction worked together to immerse the audience in this harsh prehistoric world, often making you feel as though you're traveling beside the two leads. Performances across the board are effective, but the young protagonist carries the film especially well. His portrayal of fear, growth, pain, and resilience anchors the entire experience. The production design also deserves praise. Costumes, weapons, shelters, and tools all feel believable and lived in, helping sell the illusion of life 20,000 years in the past. Another impressive element is the film's use of language. Although not based on a real historical tongue, the constructed speech sounds convincing and consistent, adding to the sense of authenticity. The combination of real wolves, trained wolf dogs, and CGI enhancements further strengthens the realism of the animal sequences, which are often breathtaking. At its core, this is a survival thriller mixed with adventure and emotional drama. A young hunter, abandoned after his first major expedition, must endure hunger, injury, predators, and extreme weather. Along the way, he discovers that leadership, courage, and compassion are forged through hardship. The film presents an imaginative take on how humanity may have first formed its bond with what would eventually become man's best friend. Though the pacing can feel slow at times, especially in its quieter stretches, the deliberate tempo suits the story's reflective nature. The movie may not have dominated the box office, but it seems to be gaining greater appreciation over time, and rightly so. Overall, this is an absorbing prehistoric tale filled with danger, beauty, and emotional depth. If you're in the mood for a visually striking survival story with heart, this film is absolutely worth watching. The film features a solid and respectable cast, including Kodi Smit-McPhee, Jóhannes Haukur Jóhanness, Natasha Malth, Leonor Verla as the tribe's shaman, and a brief but effective narration from Morgan Freeman at both the opening and closing moments. Written by Daniel Sebastian Wiedenhaupt alongside director Albert Hughes, the story unfolds as a stripped-down survival tale centered on a young boy who must rely on instinct, courage, and endurance to stay alive in a brutal prehistoric world. Visually, the movie is stunning. Cinematographer Martin Gischlack delivers rich, atmospheric imagery that captures vast wilderness landscapes filmed across Vancouver and British Columbia, Brooks in Alberta, and locations in California such as Cougar Buttes and Lucerne Valley. Complementing the visuals is an evocative musical score by Joseph S. Debisi and Michael Stearns, which heightens tension and reinforces the emotional weight of the journey. Albert Hughes proves himself once again to be a capable and confident filmmaker. Alongside his brother Alan, he previously gained attention with Menace II Society, 1993, a low-budget project that became a major success after premiering at Cannes. They followed with Dead Presidents, 1995, and later the documentary American Pimp, 1999. Their filmography also includes From Hell and the widely successful The Book of Eli, which blended post-apocalyptic aesthetics with philosophical undertones. With Alpha 2018, Albert steps into solo directing and crafts a more intimate yet ambitious survival adventure. Overall rating, notable, better than average. This is an engaging action-adventure that should appeal strongly to fans of wilderness survival stories. The movie's release history was complicated. First promoted in September 2017, it faced multiple delays, partly due to an investigation involving the killing of several bison during production, which ultimately prevented the film from receiving a "No Animals Were Harmed" certification. After waiting nearly a year to finally see it, expectations were understandably high. Set roughly 20,000 years ago during the Upper Paleolithic era, the story follows a small tribe of hunter-gatherers preparing for a major hunt to secure food for winter. The tribe's leader, Tao, trains his teenage son Keda and allows him to join the expedition, despite concerns from Keda's mother, Ro, who believes her son is not yet ready for such a dangerous task. Tao attempts to test Keda's courage by ordering him to kill a captured boar, but the boy hesitates and cannot bring himself to do it. That same night, a saber-toothed predator attacks the camp, snatching one of the young hunters. The tribe later performs a symbolic stone ritual to honor the fallen warrior's spirit. After days of travel, the group encounters a massive herd of steppe bison and attempts to drive them over a cliff. The plan partially succeeds, but in the chaos, Keda is knocked over the edge. He clings desperately to the rock face before losing his grip and plunging down, shattering his leg and falling unconscious. Tao tries to descend to save him, but another tribesman convinces him that Keda is beyond reach. Believing his son dead, Tao mourns as the tribe builds a memorial cairn. Keda, however, survives. He awakens to a scavenging vulture pecking at him and struggles to descend further into a ravine. A sudden storm causes flash flooding, sweeping him away, yet he miraculously endures. Once the waters recede, Keda fashions a crude splint for his leg and climbs back up the cliff, only to discover the stone memorial placed in his honor. Realizing he has been left behind, he begins the long journey home alone. Along the way, Keda is attacked by a pack of wolves and narrowly escapes by climbing a tree, managing to wound one of them in the process. The following day, instead of finishing off the injured animal, Keda chooses compassion. He binds its muzzle, cleans its wounds, and gradually nurses it back to health. Over time, trust forms between them. Keda asserts leadership by eating first and slowly earns the wolf's acceptance. Though Keda initially continues his journey alone, the wolf follows. Together, they learn to hunt small prey and survive as a team. Keda names his companion Alpha. One night, they encounter a hostile wolf pack. The group hesitates when Alpha steps forward and communicates peacefully. With Keda's silent approval, Alpha joins his own kind, leaving Keda to continue his trek by himself. As winter sets in and the world transforms into an icy wasteland at the dawn of the last ice age, Keda presses forward. His path eventually leads him to a frozen lake where wolves feed upon trapped prey, an ominous reminder of how unforgiving nature truly is. Separated by fate yet bound by survival, Keda's journey reaches an emotional turning point when he finally recognizes Alpha across a frozen expanse. He rushes forward, but the ice gives way beneath his feet, plunging him into icy water. Alpha instinctively leaps into action, helping pull Keda back to safety. This reunion strengthens their growing bond, proving that they are no longer simply two survivors traveling side by side, but partners. As they press onward, they stumble upon the frozen remains of a lone hunter outside his abandoned shelter. From the body, they salvage a bow and a single arrow, though no food can be found. Hunger and exhaustion continue to stalk them. Seeking refuge one night, they hide inside a cave to avoid a circling pack of hyenas. Unfortunately, danger follows them inside when a massive predatory cat attacks. Alpha engages the beast in a desperate struggle while Keda, summoning his courage, fires the arrow and kills it. Victory comes at a cost. Alpha is badly wounded and struggles to walk. Keda himself begins showing signs of serious internal injury, coughing blood as his condition worsens. Eventually, Alpha can no longer move on her own, forcing Keda to carry her across the frozen landscape. Step by step, through sheer willpower, he pushes onward until he finally reaches his village. The reunion with his parents is filled with disbelief and joy. They are astonished not only that Keda survived, but that he returns with a wolf at his side. The villagers tend to Alpha's injuries and, in an unexpected and tender moment, help her give birth to a litter of pups. Alpha and her offspring are welcomed into the tribe, growing alongside Keda. Over time, humans and wolves begin living and hunting together, forming a shared existence that feels like the birth of an ancient partnership. The film is narrated with calm authority and features a strong supporting cast, but it is Kodi Smit-McPhee who truly carries the story. His performance captures vulnerability, determination, and quiet strength. The wolf playing Alpha is equally compelling, delivering subtle emotion through body language, soft whines, and loyal presence. While stories about survival and human-animal companionship have appeared in many films before, most notably tales such as Life of Pi, this movie stands apart through its prehistoric setting and grounded storytelling. The title may initially suggest something symbolic, but at its heart, this is a simple and powerful origin story for humanity's earliest bond with wolves. Visually, the film is breathtaking. Sweeping landscapes, snow-covered wilderness, and harsh terrain feel alive, almost like characters themselves. The movie doesn't shy away from showing pain, injury, and struggle, yet it balances those moments with warmth and emotional payoff. It becomes both thrilling and deeply touching. Set roughly 20,000 years in the past, the story unfolds in a world where spoken language is minimal and conveyed through a fictional dialect, with subtitles guiding the audience. This creative choice enhances the sense of immersion. At its core, the narrative is a classic coming-of-age tale, a boy trying to prove himself, failing in devastating fashion, and ultimately discovering who he truly is. The film opens with a small prehistoric tribe struggling to survive against nature's cruelty. Keda, son of the tribe's leader, has completed the necessary rites to join a hunting expedition. However, during the hunt, disaster strikes when he is badly injured and left stranded on a cliff. Believed dead, the tribe moves on. Keda survives the fall, though severely wounded. Using the survival knowledge his father taught him, especially reading the stars, he begins the impossible task of finding his way home. Along his path, he encounters a wounded wolf. Their first meeting is hostile and fearful, but circumstance forces them together. Slowly, mutual trust grows, transforming enemies into allies. The film may not reinvent the survival genre, but it tells its story with sincerity and confidence. It's a clean, heartfelt adventure that highlights endurance, loyalty, and the origins of companionship between humans and animals. For viewers seeking an emotional and visually striking historical adventure, this film delivers a rewarding experience. Several hours pass before he finally dares to climb down from the tree. To his surprise, the wounded wolf he left behind is still breathing. Against all logic and every instinct for self-preservation, he makes a bold choice. Instead of finishing the animal off, he tends to its injuries and attempts to keep it alive. What begins as an act of reckless compassion slowly evolves into a fragile bond. From that moment forward, boy and wolf become unlikely allies, relying on one another to survive the brutal trials that lie ahead. Without spoiling anything further, I can say that the film is an engaging experience that held my interest from beginning to end. That said, it isn't without flaws. A few stretches move at a sluggish pace, particularly in the latter portion, and there are moments that lean a bit too heavily into sentimentality. Still, while I wouldn't label it a masterpiece, it's an enjoyable journey that most viewers will probably appreciate. Overall, I'd place it slightly above average. In many ways, this film feels like a primordial blueprint for every boy and his dog story that followed. It functions both as a rugged survival adventure and a tender coming-of-age tale about a young man forming the first bond with a wolf. You could almost view it as the ancestral ancestor of all famous canine companion stories that came later. The director, previously known for urban crime dramas and gritty modern settings, takes a dramatic turn here by transporting audiences to Ice Age Europe, roughly 20,000 years in the past. With a moderate blockbuster budget, the film recounts a disastrous hunting expedition that forces a father to leave behind his injured son, believing him lost. From that heartbreaking turning point, the story becomes a test of endurance, courage, and emotional growth. To the filmmaker's credit, the narrative remains focused and doesn't overreach. The plot is straightforward and predictable, but it's also accessible and easy to follow. The young lead actor carries the movie effectively, conveying vulnerability and quiet determination with minimal dialogue, no small feat in a story where silence often speaks louder than words. Given the prehistoric setting, digital effects are unavoidable, and they're used wisely. The CGI enhances the landscapes and wildlife without overwhelming the human drama. Even better, the wolf itself is portrayed by a real canine rather than a fully digital creation, which adds authenticity to the animal's behavior and interactions. The chemistry between the boy and the wolf feels organic, helping sell the emotional core of the film. One of the film's most striking sequences occurs early on during a massive tribal hunt. Warriors crawl toward a herd of bison, then launch their spears, not to strike, but to plant them in the ground as a crude barrier. The startled animals panic, charge, and ultimately stampede over a cliff to their deaths. It's a visually arresting moment that demonstrates both human ingenuity and the harsh cost of survival. Tragedy strikes when a lone bison resists the stampede and attacks. It impales the chieftain's son and drags him toward the edge, leaving him gravely injured and separated from his people. This brutal incident sets the entire story in motion, pushing the young protagonist into a lonely wilderness where he must either adapt or perish. By the time the film reaches its conclusion, there's a quietly powerful revelation involving the wolf that recontextualizes their journey together. It's best experienced without prior knowledge. In the end, the movie succeeds more through atmosphere and emotional sincerity than through narrative originality. It may not break new ground, but it offers a heartfelt, visually impressive survival tale that reminds us how companionship, no matter how unlikely, can become a lifeline in the harshest circumstances. Without warning, the massive bison halts at the brink of the cliff and violently hurls the young hunter into the abyss. The horrifying sight leaves Tao utterly shattered. Rushing to the edge, the chief and his warriors glimpse Keda lying motionless on a small rocky ledge far below. Desperate to reach his son, Tao attempts a reckless rescue, but the tribe restrains him, knowing such an effort would almost certainly mean death. With heavy hearts, they retreat, and Tao stacks stones in mourning, believing Keda has perished. The film then rewinds to events 1 week earlier, shifting focus to Keda, Tao's only child and the central figure of this story. Unlike the other boys his age, Keda shows little enthusiasm for violence, but he possesses a delicate skill, shaping stone into finely crafted arrowheads. While many of his peers struggle to create weapons capable of drawing blood, Keda's craftsmanship sets him apart. Still, his gentle nature makes others question his readiness for the hunt. Despite these doubts, Keda eagerly anticipates his first expedition alongside his father. His mother, Ro, however, fears that her son's compassionate spirit will hinder his survival, famously remarking that he leads with his heart, not his spear. After surviving the fall, Keda awakens to a grim sight. A scavenging vulture hovering nearby. A violent storm soon floods the river below, forcing him to leap from his precarious perch. Injured but alive, Keda stumbles into an even deadlier threat, a pack of starving wolves. Managing to wound their leader, he narrowly escapes by climbing a tree. Instead of killing the injured animal, Keda later chooses mercy, tending to its wounds. Slowly, a fragile trust forms between boy and beast. Around flickering campfires and shared meals, their bond deepens, eventually evolving into a cooperative partnership where the wolf drives prey toward Keda's arrows. As a prehistoric survival tale, the film is noticeably stronger than many modern attempts at similar stories, yet it never reaches the raw power or ambition of classic genre entries. While the outcome is never truly in doubt, the emotional core, centered on the evolving relationship between the boy and the wolf, keeps viewers engaged. The absence of sexual content makes it less intense than some earlier cave-era dramas, but also more accessible for family audiences. The film's pace can feel sluggish, especially since travel is limited entirely to foot journeys, resulting in long stretches between major confrontations. Still, the quieter moments between Keda and the wolf are warm and sincere, delivering most of the film's heart. The production avoids profanity entirely, and the tribe communicates through a fabricated language accompanied by subtitles, a choice that may divide viewers who prefer conventional dialogue. Despite its sweeping landscapes and heavy use of visual effects, the movie often carries an oddly low-budget feel. This impression is amplified by an overly sentimental opening and closing narration that clashes with the rugged survival tone, making the film resemble a nature documentary more than a gritty fictional adventure. The story also leans heavily into portraying a mythic origin of dog domestication, a concept that receives more emphasis than the broader survival narrative truly warrants. Much of the runtime is spent ticking off familiar, how humans tamed dogs moments, shared food, loyalty tests, hunting together, playful behavior. Yet these scenes don't fully explore the fascinating prehistoric setting or elevate the drama. As a result, a subtle sense of monotony occasionally settles in, even when the story aims for emotional resonance. In the end, the film succeeds more as a gentle, visually pleasing fable than as a gripping survival epic. It offers touching moments and a likable central relationship, but its predictable structure and uneven tone prevent it from reaching the full potential promised by its premise. To its credit, the film convincingly sells the idea that it takes place tens of thousands of years in the past. Most of the time, the environments feel authentic and suitably ancient, although the illusion is occasionally broken by oddly stylized, speed-ramped shots and digital-looking skies. There are moments that are genuinely engaging, but a large portion of the runtime drifts into monotony, which is arguably the film's biggest weakness. A story can forgive flaws in many areas, but boredom is harder to excuse. Adding to the discomfort is the reported absence of a "no animals were harmed" disclaimer, allegedly due to real bison being killed for a scene that never even made it into the final cut. If true, that's deeply troubling and impossible to justify, regardless of whether their hides ended up contributing to the hero's wardrobe. Visually, the movie starts strong. The opening imagery is striking, and the first sequence sets a powerful tone. Unfortunately, that visual consistency doesn't last. Some scenes look breathtaking, while others are painfully artificial, with obvious green screen work that pulls you out of the experience. At its heart, this is another variation on the familiar tale of a young human forming a bond with a wolf, similar in spirit to films like Wolf Totem and Loop. However, this version never reaches the same emotional depth or sense of authenticity. Communication is another hurdle. The characters speak in a constructed language, leaving viewers to infer much of what's being said. This choice adds atmosphere, but also creates emotional distance, which may alienate audiences who struggle to connect without clear dialogue. That said, the growing relationship between the boy and the wolf is the film's strongest element. Their gradual trust and dependence on one another hints at the earliest roots of animal domestication, and these quieter moments are genuinely effective. Overall, it works reasonably well as a straightforward adventure drama. Structurally, the story is extremely simple. A young hunter becomes separated from his tribe and must find his way back home. The film blends survival storytelling, a coming-of-age arc, and animal companionship into one package. There's even a soft romantic note in how the story concludes, centered around the continuation of life and family. Nothing in the narrative is particularly surprising. The computer-generated imagery is frequent and serviceable at best. The performances are decent, but with such a small central cast, a boy, a wolf, and a handful of supporting players, there isn't much room for standout acting. By the time the credits roll, you may feel mildly uplifted, and you'll probably remember a few pleasing scenes, but the film never becomes more than a modest, competently made genre piece. Also worth noting, Morgan Freeman's involvement amounts to only a brief stretch of narration, despite his prominent billing. Personally, prehistoric set films have never been a favorite of mine. Earlier examples ranged from campy spectacle to forgettable experiments, and even modern attempts often lean into stylized excess rather than meaningful storytelling. This movie fits somewhere in the middle. It's not terrible, but it doesn't break new ground either. The plot is set around 20,000 BC during the Ice Age. Despite being filmed in Canada, the story is meant to unfold in Europe, which makes sense historically, since humans had not yet reached the Americas at that time. The protagonist, Keda, is a young member of a hunter-gatherer group. During a dangerous bison hunt, he is knocked off a cliff. Though he survives the fall by landing on a narrow ledge, his companions assume he is dead and leave him behind, devastating his parents, Tao and Ro. An odd detail is that many characters are named after Greek letters, an amusing but historically out-of-place choice, given that the Greek alphabet wouldn't exist for another 19 millennia. In the end, the film is a gentle, visually uneven survival tale with a likable core and a familiar message. It has moments of beauty and warmth, but it never quite reaches the level of emotional power or narrative strength needed to make it truly memorable. Keda's story, thankfully, doesn't end with his fall. Otherwise, there wouldn't be much of a movie to talk about. Against all odds, he survives the plunge and slowly finds his way to the base of the cliff. His struggle continues when he's confronted by a pack of wolves, creatures that folklore and legend have often painted as villains, from fairy tales like Little Red Riding Hood to countless cautionary stories about savage beasts lurking in the dark. Yet, much like a few rare tales that have chosen a kinder perspective, this film challenges that old stereotype. During the encounter, Keda manages to wound one of the wolves. His instinct tells him to finish the job, but compassion gets the better of him. Instead of delivering the final blow, he tends to the animal's injury. What begins as a tense standoff slowly transforms into an uneasy partnership, then into something deeper. Over time, the boy and the wolf form a bond rooted in necessity, trust, and shared survival. Keda eventually names the wolf Alpha, a name that carries meaning, though not quite in the way one might expect. From this point onward, the film becomes a survival journey, tracking Keda and Alpha as they attempt to navigate a brutal wilderness and make their way back to Keda's people. Along the way, the movie employs a constructed prehistoric language, giving the dialogue a sense of authenticity. Unlike earlier caveman films that relied on extremely limited vocabularies, this language feels more organic and expressive, and subtitles ensure viewers can follow every word. Despite being shot in 2016, the film faced multiple delays before finally reaching audiences in 2018. In hindsight, the wait feels justified. The narrative is straightforward but emotionally resonant. The performances are restrained yet convincing, and the sweeping mountain and forest landscapes are nothing short of stunning. Any one of these elements could have carried the film. Together, they create something quietly special. The actor playing Keda brings a gentle vulnerability to the role, perfectly matching a character who isn't built for brute dominance. His mother understands this about him, recognizing that her son's strength lies not in physical ferocity, but in empathy. That very quality allows him to spare the wolf and unknowingly take part in the earliest spark of a relationship that would shape human history, the partnership between humans and dogs. The director makes an impressive statement with this visually rich and soulful adventure. Rather than leaning heavily into melodrama, the film favors a grounded survival tale about a lost boy trying to find his way home, accompanied by a wounded animal who becomes his ally. The emotional moments feel earned, never forced. While the opening sequences feature intense danger, massive animals driven over cliffs and predators prowling in the shadows, the heart of the story is always the slow, believable growth of trust between two species. It's a familiar boy and his dog concept, but told from a fresh angle, stripping away excessive sentimentality and focusing instead on cooperation, dependence, and mutual respect. One line from Keda's father encapsulates the harsh worldview of their world: "Life belongs to the strong, it must be earned." Ironically, the film itself suggests a different kind of strength, one rooted not in dominance but in compassion. And that quiet message is what ultimately gives this prehistoric adventure its lasting power. There's something about the lead actor that immediately commands attention. He even carries a resemblance to a young Orson Welles. That natural weight in his presence makes it easier to accept a prehistoric character who speaks with depth and intelligence. Once you embrace that idea, the film becomes an absorbing summer-style adventure, the kind that feels perfect for a road trip with your favorite companion riding shotgun. In many ways, the sense of wonder and nostalgia echoes the feeling of classic survival tales, almost reminiscent of early Ice Age-style storytelling. After years of anticipation, this long-discussed project from Albert Hughes has finally arrived. What's especially impressive is that it's a largely subtitled American production that still received a wide release, something rarely seen. The story centers on a teenage boy whose tribe believes he has perished after a disastrous buffalo hunt. Separated from his people and presumed dead, he must navigate a harsh wilderness while discovering what it truly means to grow into manhood. This isn't the most instantly accessible film, blending elements of classic adventure literature with quiet, documentary-like realism. The pacing is deliberate, but the story gradually draws you in. If there's one lingering thought, it's that there may exist a longer, more intense version somewhere, perhaps a rougher cut that dives deeper into the brutality of survival. The version we see feels streamlined, as if shaped to be more approachable for a wider audience. At its core, Alpha is an adventure drama set in prehistoric times, following a young hunter who is the son of his tribe's leader. After being left behind during a dangerous hunt, he must rely solely on his instincts to stay alive. Along the way, he encounters an injured wolf, abandoned by its own pack. What begins as a cautious standoff slowly evolves into an unlikely bond that becomes central to both of their survival. I went into this movie with modest expectations, and I was pleasantly surprised. The story is simple, yet emotionally effective. The performances help sell the authenticity of the world, making it easy to feel immersed in the journey. Kodi Smit-McPhee delivers a strong and heartfelt portrayal of Keda, capturing both vulnerability and quiet determination. Jóhannes Haukur Jóhanness also leaves a strong impression as Tao, the demanding but conflicted father who struggles to understand his son. Albert Hughes' direction is straightforward, but never dull. Instead of relying on flashy spectacle, he focuses on atmosphere, character growth, and visual storytelling. Over time, we witness Keda evolve from an uncertain boy into someone capable of facing overwhelming odds. Visually, the film is striking. Sweeping landscapes, golden sunsets, and expansive wilderness shots give the movie a majestic quality. The cinematography highlights the beauty and danger of Paleolithic Europe, while the visual effects blend seamlessly into the environment. The narrative follows Keda as he joins a hunting expedition with his father and fellow tribesmen, hoping to prove himself before winter arrives. He feels constant pressure, believing he has failed his father by not being ruthless enough or skilled enough. When disaster strikes and he's separated from the group, Keda must learn quickly how to make fire, hunt small prey, and protect himself from predators. His encounter with the wolves becomes a turning point. Instead of killing the wounded alpha wolf, Keda chooses compassion. Through patience and persistence, he slowly earns the animal's trust, forming a partnership that mirrors the earliest stages of human-wolf cooperation. The film won't appeal to everyone. Some viewers may find the pacing slow or the story too quiet. But for those willing to engage with its meditative rhythm, Alpha offers a rewarding survival tale about resilience, empathy, and self-discovery. In the end, this is a beautifully shot coming-of-age adventure that emphasizes courage, growth, and the bond between humans and animals. It may not be groundbreaking, but it delivers a meaningful experience with heart, atmosphere, and a strong central performance. I'd recommend it to anyone who enjoys survival stories and reflective journeys, especially those that remind us that strength isn't only about force, but also about compassion. He splints his shattered ankle, figures out how to spark a fire, survives on whatever he can find, worms, grubs, and scraps, and eventually forms an uneasy partnership with a wounded wolf that follows him through the wilderness. From a technical standpoint, the filmmaking is often stunning. The scenery is breathtaking, and many of the wide shots, especially those framed against glowing sunlight, feel like living paintings rather than simple movie scenes. The visual effects mostly hold up well, although a few animal shots look a bit artificial and can break the illusion. Still, these moments are fairly minor compared to how strong the film looks overall. Kodi Smit-McPhee delivers a very solid performance, carrying much of the movie on his shoulders. The film uses minimal dialogue and attempts to lean into a primitive style of communication, giving the sense of an ancient language without overcomplicating things. This approach never becomes distracting. Instead, the story relies more on facial expressions, gestures, and physical actions than spoken words, which suits the setting nicely. The opening portion is engaging, following Keda as he joins his father and tribe on a dangerous hunting expedition. When they encounter another group while preparing for the hunt, the tension immediately establishes the harsh world these people inhabit. However, the middle section slows considerably once Keda encounters the injured wolf and shelters inside a cave. A large portion of this act focuses on recovery, Keda healing his leg and the wolf struggling with its own wound, while he also attempts to teach the animal patience around food. These moments are important for character development, but they do drag somewhat. Things pick up again when Keda realizes he must reach home before winter fully sets in. One of the bigger issues, though, is the lack of strong conflict throughout his journey. Most obstacles, freezing weather, hyenas, and a large predatory cat, are introduced and resolved rather quickly. The climax revolves mainly around Keda pushing himself to survive long enough to reach his people, which may leave some viewers feeling underwhelmed, wondering if that's all there is. Overall, Alpha is a decent and visually pleasing film. The direction and effects are handled with care, the sense of adventure is present, and the performances are convincing. The musical score by Joseph S. Debussy adds emotional weight, and the cinematography consistently impresses. Unfortunately, the slower second act and limited narrative tension hold the film back from being truly memorable. Initially, many details bothered my more analytical side, as several elements felt scientifically questionable. But eventually, I stopped overanalyzing and focused on the emotional core, the bond forming between a lost boy and an injured animal, both simply trying to survive and return to their families. It's easy to understand why many viewers respond positively to this story. The wolf-dog hybrids are striking, expressive, and sympathetic, and watching fear gradually transform into trust is one of the film's strongest aspects. During a hunt with part of his tribe, Keda falls from a cliff. Believed to be beyond saving, he is left behind and assumed dead. When he awakens among circling vultures, he begins an exhausting journey across hostile terrain. This setup is undeniably effective on an emotional level, especially for audiences who connect strongly with survival stories driven by heart rather than logic. Set roughly 20,000 years in the past, the movie explores the imagined beginnings of the bond between humans and dogs. Keda, a boy on the edge of manhood, joins his father on his first bison hunt despite his mother's doubts. After becoming separated from his people, he must rely on memory, instinct, and the lessons passed down by his father. One of his earliest and most dangerous encounters is with a pack of wolves, an experience that ultimately changes his fate. One of the wolves is badly wounded and separated from its pack, and if that sounds familiar, it's because the movie mirrors this condition with its human protagonist. Keda takes pity on the injured animal and gradually helps it recover. Over time, an unspoken bond forms between them, and both come to realize that survival in this unforgiving world depends on cooperation. A few quick notes worth mentioning. The film relies heavily on subtitles, so be prepared to read throughout. The wolf is eventually named Alpha by Keda. Filming took place in Canada, and the production does not carry the usual "no animals were harmed" disclaimer, as 4 bison were ethically culled for a hide processing sequence. The movie is rated PG-13 for intense peril and runs just over 90 minutes. It's the kind of film I'd happily own on disc for family viewing, though it also works well as a rental. Although it can be loosely described as a boy and his dog story, Alpha reaches far beyond that simple idea. It explores the customs, beliefs, and survival struggles of hunter-gatherer communities living in Ice Age Europe roughly 20,000 years ago. Young boys of the tribe must prove themselves before being allowed to join their first hunt, and shaping a proper spearhead is the crucial test. Once the rite is complete, the hunters, along with a skilled huntress, begin their journey and later unite with another group at a trail marker. During the bison drive, chaos erupts. A massive bull turns on the group, sending Keda, the chief's son, plunging off a cliff. Believed dead, he is mourned and his father returns home in grief, but Keda survives. Alone and injured, he encounters a pack of dire wolves. He manages to wound one in self-defense, yet later chooses compassion and treats the creature's injuries instead of finishing it off. This moment becomes the foundation for an unusual truce. The wolf, whom Keda names Alpha, and the boy form a fragile partnership as they attempt to navigate back to the tribe's homeland. Keda constantly seems to imagine a future where humans and wolves can coexist. Slowly, that idea takes shape. The two learn to hunt together, share food, and protect each other from danger. Alpha even begins defending Keda when predators approach, marking the earliest hint of what we now know as domestication. The film places great emphasis on ritual and tradition. A shaman conducts ceremonies before the hunt, and his elaborate staff and ornaments feel painstakingly researched. Several memorable sequences highlight the dangers of prehistoric life. A saber-toothed cat attacking a night camp, hunters masking their scent with dung to avoid detection by bison, and long journeys across frozen plains, forests, wetlands, and ice fields. The animal life of the Upper Paleolithic era is brought vividly to the screen, with mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, and towering bison roaming the landscape. The story presents a believable portrait of early tribal existence and humanity's first steps toward bonding with wolves. The performances from Kodi Smit-McPhee and the wolf portraying Alpha are especially strong, carrying much of the film's emotional weight without relying on excessive dialogue. Revisiting the movie now feels strangely nostalgic. Time has passed quickly since its release, yet it still feels fresh. On a personal level, I'm drawn to its themes of wolves and ancestry, particularly because some Turkic legends speak of wolves as ancestral figures, which adds an extra layer of connection for me. I admire Alpha for its simplicity. Some shots are clearly staged and composed in a classic style reminiscent of old Western films, and rather than detract, this actually enhances its charm. It gives the movie a timeless storybook quality. My personal rating sits slightly above average, mainly because I'm judging the director's cut prepared for Blu-ray. This version expands on the emotional relationship between Keda and Alpha, giving their bond more depth and making their journey feel more earned. Visually, the cinematography is stunning. Wide landscape shots showcase the raw beauty and danger of the ancient world, while quieter close-ups keep the focus on the characters' emotional states. The musical score complements this perfectly, reinforcing both the tension and the tenderness throughout the story. In the end, Alpha succeeds as a heartfelt survival tale, a historical fantasy, and a meditation on the origins of one of humanity's oldest friendships. The film's music, a striking fusion of sweeping orchestral tones and earthy tribal rhythms, beautifully reflects its emotional heartbeat, amplifying both the danger and the tenderness of Keda's journey. While the storyline itself is fairly simple, it's the performances that give the material real depth. Kodi Smit-McPhee brings remarkable sensitivity to Keda, portraying a young boy torn between fear and determination as he struggles through an unforgiving wilderness. At the center of the story is the relationship between Keda and the wounded wolf he rescues. Their slow-growing trust becomes the soul of the film, delivering moments that are quietly moving as well as pulse-pounding. In many ways, Alpha serves as a tribute to the ancient bond between humans and animals, a visually rich, emotionally grounded tale about survival, companionship, and the shared will to endure. At its core, Alpha is about a boy and a wolf learning to rely on each other. It explores why dogs eventually earned the title of humanity's closest companion. While this concept has been explored in other films, presenting it through a prehistoric lens makes it feel more intimate and emotionally focused. Even with solid acting and a strong narrative foundation, what truly dominates the experience is the film's visual and auditory presentation. The cinematography is outstanding. Vast landscapes are captured with awe-inspiring beauty, and several scenes use bold camera angles that heighten their impact. One standout moment is when Keda becomes injured. The editing during this sequence is unconventional and heightens the intensity in a way that feels raw and immediate. The sound design and score also deserve praise, especially the heavy use of drums and wind instruments, which give the film an ancient, ritualistic atmosphere. Every sound seems carefully chosen to pull the audience deeper into this distant world. One fascinating detail is that the dialogue is spoken in a language created specifically for the film. It's an ambitious choice that adds authenticity and immersion. Because of this, Alpha feels like an unusual candidate for a typical summer adventure release. It plays more like a symbolic, almost poetic survival tale than a standard crowd-pleasing blockbuster. The story of endurance and the origin of mankind's first canine companion works well overall, even if certain plot beats are easy to predict. Yes, there's even a playful moment that hints at the accidental invention of fetch. However, the parental characters could have benefited from more development. Still, the film cleverly challenges traditional ideas surrounding the concept of an alpha wolf, which adds an interesting thematic layer. Ultimately, Alpha is driven by mood, imagery, and thematic weight more than complex plotting. In that sense, it excels. Its visuals possess a rugged beauty that perfectly matches the harshness of the world it depicts. Tiny human moments set against enormous landscapes feel especially powerful, and several shots linger in the mind long after the film ends. The pacing is strong, and the runtime passes quickly. The subtitled dialogue is simple and direct, which surprisingly enhances the sense of realism rather than detracting from it. Smit-McPhee carries the film with confidence, convincingly portraying a boy on the edge of adulthood. His interactions with the wolf feel genuine, and he holds the screen effortlessly. It wouldn't be surprising to see his performance earn some recognition. While animal lovers will certainly appreciate Alpha, this isn't just a feel-good story about a boy and his dog. It's more about primal survival and the brutality of early human existence. Viewers who enjoy gritty survival films may find even more to admire here. I'm genuinely glad I gave this film a chance. It's an unconventional and quietly powerful experience, and one worth discovering. Going in, I had fairly low expectations, especially after being burned by disappointing prehistoric epics like 10,000 BC. Thankfully, Alpha proved to be a far more thoughtful and rewarding journey. Alpha emerges as a surprisingly heartfelt blend of survival adventure, emotional drama, and near-documentary realism, delivering a story that feels both ancient and timeless. Instead of burying itself under dense exposition or convoluted storytelling like many prehistoric films tend to do, this movie embraces a stripped-down approach, allowing visuals, body language, and atmosphere to carry most of the narrative weight. The story centers on a young boy who accompanies his tribe and his father, their respected leader, on his very first hunt. A tragic accident leaves him presumed dead, abandoned far from home in a merciless wilderness. Against impossible odds, he survives only to encounter a pack of wolves. During the confrontation, he injures one wolf but ultimately chooses compassion over fear, tending to its wounds. This single decision becomes the foundation for a powerful bond that quietly hints at the earliest roots of the relationship between humans and dogs. Both the boy and the wolf are broken, lost, and vulnerable. Yet together they form an unlikely partnership, pushing through brutal landscapes, deadly predators, and unforgiving weather in hopes of reuniting with their families before winter consumes them. Their journey is filled with peril, but also small moments of trust, warmth, and growth that make the emotional payoff deeply satisfying. One of the film's strongest choices is its minimal use of dialogue. Rather than spelling everything out, it invites viewers to interpret feelings through facial expressions, gestures, and silence. This restraint gives the movie an intimate quality and makes the protagonist's transformation, from frightened youth to resilient survivor, feel genuine and earned. Visually, the film is striking. The sweeping cinematography captures vast frozen plains, raging rivers, and towering mountains with precision and beauty. The camera work feels deliberate and immersive, while the musical score elevates both the quiet character moments and the large-scale action sequences. Together, they reinforce the epic scope without overshadowing the personal story at its core. Another welcome aspect is the film's refusal to overload itself with flashy effects, distracting subplots, or excessive backstory. Everything feels purposeful. Even when digital effects are used to recreate prehistoric animals and environments, they mostly serve the story rather than dominate it. While not flawless, the visual work successfully brings a long-lost world to life. The movie also carries meaningful themes that resonate across ages: family bonds, perseverance, loyalty, grief, and hope. Because of this, it works equally well for younger viewers discovering adventure cinema and adults looking for emotional depth. What I initially expected to be a simple wilderness tale turned into one of the most memorable viewing experiences of the year. Whether you lean toward action, drama, or nature-driven storytelling, Alpha manages to strike a careful balance between all three. Now, shifting briefly into reviewer mode, a movie involving dogs can sometimes be unpredictable. Some lean heavily into sentimentality, others into spectacle. Alpha finds a respectable middle ground. It isn't strictly a dog movie, but rather an origin-style tale exploring how companionship between humans and wolves may have begun. The pacing deserves praise. Survival films with minimal characters can easily feel sluggish, but this one keeps moving. The journey unfolds steadily without unnecessary detours, and the runtime, just over 90 minutes, feels well utilized. The visual effects team also deserves credit. Recreating a prehistoric world requires imagination and technical skill, and the film largely succeeds. Landscapes feel expansive and dangerous, while the animals display convincing movement and texture. Though a few moments appear slightly artificial, the overall presentation remains impressive. In the end, Alpha is far more thoughtful than its premise might suggest. It's a quiet, visually rich, and emotionally grounded experience, one that can be enjoyed with friends, family, or even younger viewers. Beneath its survival adventure exterior lies a surprisingly deep meditation on connection and trust, making it a film that lingers long after the final scene fades. Costume design creating convincing tribal attire takes research, patience, and a strong eye for detail, and Alpha largely succeeds in this area. While I'm no expert on ancient cultures, the tribespeople appear equipped with believable gear a plains hunter might rely on. Their clothing isn't just decorative, it feels purposeful, reflecting survival rather than style. Although the lead character's outfit naturally draws the most attention, the real strength comes from seeing the tribe as a whole, where small costume details quietly stand out and add authenticity. The wolf, whenever the wolf appears on screen, it completely commands attention. From its expressive eyes and soft whines to its cautious, intelligent stares, this animal instantly wins the audience over. Beyond being adorable, the trained performance during action moments is impressive, showing discipline and emotional range. Whether created through practical effects or digital enhancements, the wolf easily becomes the film's most captivating presence. Cinematography, let's be honest, the visuals are the film's biggest selling point. The landscapes are breathtaking, featuring roaring waterfalls, glowing night skies, and endless open plains that feel both beautiful and threatening. Sunrises and sunsets bring a sense of renewal and closure, while vibrant colors blend together like living paintings. Add carefully applied CGI into the mix, and the environment feels rich, immersive, and alive. Dislikes animals suffering, I understand that survival in ancient times was brutal, but watching prolonged scenes of animals in pain was uncomfortable. Instead of cutting away quickly, the film often lingers on the struggle, emphasizing the harshness of hunting. While a few mercy kills are shown, some moments feel unnecessarily drawn out. Viewers sensitive to animal cruelty should be aware that these sequences can be difficult to watch. Weak dialogue, thankfully, the visuals carry much of the storytelling, because the spoken and subtitled communication does not. The primitive grunts and basic language may aim for realism, but they lack emotional impact. The dialogue rarely adds depth or memorability, making many exchanges feel hollow rather than meaningful. Underdeveloped supporting characters, although several characters are introduced early on, most receive minimal screen time and little development. Establishing family relationships is a nice idea, but without strong dialogue or narrative focus, these introductions feel largely unnecessary. Even the father figure, who appears in a few dreamlike sequences, never gains enough depth to leave a lasting impression. Uneven storytelling at its core, this is a straightforward, journey-home tale, and simplicity isn't a bad thing. However, the narrative sometimes feels choppy. Scenes jump quickly from one event to the next, with limited build-up or emotional transition. While the brisk pacing keeps things moving, it occasionally sacrifices immersion. A few additional connective moments could have strengthened the overall flow. Final Verdict Alpha works best as a visual experience rather than a narrative powerhouse. Its prehistoric world is beautifully realized, and the short runtime keeps the adventure moving at a steady pace. The wolf, whether real, digital, or a mix of both, is undeniably the heart of the film and often overshadows the human lead. While the plot is familiar and fairly predictable, its simple, linear structure makes it easy to follow. If you're looking for stunning scenery, emotional animal companionship, and a survival tale that doesn't overstay its welcome, Alpha is worth the journey. While the film does generate moments of tension, it ultimately plays out as a fairly relaxed survival adventure. Its greatest strength lies in portraying the harsh reality of staying alive in a prehistoric wilderness. Is it worth seeing on the big screen? From a purely visual standpoint, yes. As an overall movie experience, however, I can't fully recommend it. The 3D format also feels unnecessary, adding little beyond potential eye strain. The story poses an intriguing idea. What if the earliest connection between humans and wolves wasn't born from conquest, but from mutual dependence? Set roughly 20,000 years ago during the Upper Paleolithic period, the film follows Keda, a young hunter who is severely injured and abandoned after a disastrous bison hunt. Alone and struggling, he encounters a wounded wolf. Rather than killing the animal, Keda chooses compassion, setting in motion a partnership that becomes the heart of the film. Visually, the movie is stunning. Vast landscapes stretch endlessly across the screen, painted in bold colors that capture both the splendor and cruelty of the ancient world. The camera frequently places Keda and the wolf within enormous, unforgiving environments, emphasizing how small and fragile they truly are. With minimal dialogue and the use of a fictional language, the film relies heavily on imagery, facial expression, and body language to communicate emotion. At its best, the movie thrives on simplicity. It tells a straightforward story about endurance, trust, and the power of unlikely friendship. That said, the pacing occasionally stumbles, and certain survival scenarios unfold in ways that feel familiar or overly convenient. These moments slightly weaken the gritty authenticity the film seems to aim for. Even with these shortcomings, the evolving bond between boy and wolf, shifting from suspicion to reliance and finally to loyalty, grounds the film emotionally. It plays less like a strict historical account and more like a mythic origin tale about how companionship began. The movie deserved more attention upon release. The director clearly invested effort into researching early human traditions and lifestyles, striving to balance authenticity with accessibility. The decision to use subtitles may have limited mainstream appeal, but it significantly enhances the immersive quality of the experience. Kodi Smit-McPhee delivers a strong central performance and manages to carry much of the film on his own. At times, his resemblance to Juliette Lewis can be distracting, and some of the supporting cast appear too polished for such a rugged setting. A rougher, more weathered look across the board would have strengthened the illusion. Despite noticeable CGI flaws, the film succeeds in transporting viewers into a distant past. It feels far more convincing in this regard than many other prehistoric epics. That sense of stepping into another age is what ultimately sells the movie, and the director accomplishes this better than expected, especially considering his previous body of work. This film fits into a niche category, visually rich prehistoric stories that entertain while also sparking curiosity about humanity's origins. Much like earlier entries in this tradition, stories centered on fire, survival, and ancient tribal life, this movie celebrates nature, perseverance, and the earliest foundations of human connection. In the end, it may not be a flawless survival epic, but it stands as a thoughtful, atmospheric tale about how trust can grow even in the harshest conditions. The story shows how two very different beings slowly learn to rely on one another, setting the stage for what could be the earliest bond between humans and wolves. Presented in a reconstructed prehistoric language, the film reflects a massive effort in world building, authenticity, and visual design. The wolf, portrayed by Chuck, a Czechoslovakian wolfdog, delivers an impressively natural performance, while the human cast matches that intensity. Combined with breathtaking cinematography and a heartfelt narrative, the result feels nothing short of extraordinary. This isn't the kind of film that needs to be dissected for historical precision. Whether certain dialects existed 20,000 years ago or whether events perfectly match archaeological records simply isn't the point. What matters is that the film is sincere, well-crafted, and visually stunning. If audiences can embrace imaginative interpretations in stories like jungle adventures, dinosaur epics, or giant monster franchises, then this film deserves the same openness. Sometimes, the best approach is simple. Stop overthinking and let yourself enjoy the journey. At its core, the movie follows a young boy, barely more than a teenager, forced to survive against overwhelming odds. He faces isolation, hunger, injuries, predators, and brutal weather, all while struggling to find his way home. Along that journey, he forms an unexpected bond with an injured wolf. What begins as fear slowly transforms into trust and eventually into friendship. The wolf becomes more than an ally, it becomes a companion, a guardian, and a symbol of hope. Whether or not wolves could truly be domesticated this way is irrelevant. The emotional truth of the story is what counts. Think of it as a primitive-era survival tale in the spirit of human and nature stories like Dances with Wolves, just without firearms, replaced instead by spears, bows, fire, and raw determination. Watching with an open mind allows you to fully appreciate the impressive CGI, detailed environments, and majestic wilderness landscapes that dominate the screen. Performances across the board are excellent, especially in portraying a young survivor's resilience after a near-fatal accident. The director paints a version of Earth that feels ancient, untamed, and dangerous, long before civilizations reshaped the world. After a devastating bison attack and a terrifying fall, the boy must endure terrain as deadly as the predators stalking him. He fashions a crutch for his injured leg, mixes herbal remedies, learns to control fire, sharpens stones into tools, and scavenges a bow from abandoned ruins. As winter closes in, he even creates heavy clothing from fur to shield himself from the cold. Nearly every scene radiates atmosphere and tension, capturing both the beauty and cruelty of nature. When the northern lights blaze across the sky, the boy reflects that his ancestors are guiding him, a poetic moment that reinforces the film's spiritual undertone. The relationship between the boy and the wounded she-wolf becomes the emotional backbone of the story, illustrating how mutual care and cooperation can bridge even the widest divides. An especially clever creative choice is the use of a fictional language developed specifically for the film. Since modern English did not exist in the Stone Age, this decision adds immersion rather than distraction, helping the world feel more authentic and ancient. Yes, the storyline follows a familiar structure. Variations of this tale, a lonely hero, a wild animal companion, a test of courage, have appeared many times before. Viewers may even notice similarities to animated stories about taming dangerous creatures. But despite its recognizable framework, the film feels engaging and sincere. The emotional execution is strong enough to make its familiar beats feel meaningful rather than tired. Ultimately, the blend of survival drama and buoyant his animal companionship works beautifully. It's a simple story told with visual splendor, emotional honesty, and genuine heart, and sometimes that's more than enough. At its core, the screenplay is fairly straightforward, yet surprisingly effective. One thing I genuinely admired is the filmmaker's choice to use a real, trained wolfdog rather than relying heavily on computer-generated imagery, especially since the CGI work isn't always convincing. I also understand why the creators invented a prehistoric-style language for the characters, as no real-world languages from that era are known to us. That said, considering how approachable and family-friendly this movie is, I sometimes felt it might have been better to simply use English and allow audiences to suspend disbelief. Still, dialogue is kept to a minimum, so this choice doesn't hurt the experience too much. In fact, the fabricated language does sound believable enough that viewers might even wonder whether it's based on something real. For Albert Hughes' first solo directing project, Alpha turns out quite strong. He clearly knows how to immerse the audience in a moment, and that skill adds weight to the emotional beats. There are occasions, however, when he seems a little too enamored with the visuals, most noticeably when slow motion is stretched beyond necessity just to linger on a beautiful shot. Even so, these are minor nitpicks. Overall, Alpha is a solid entry that deserves more attention than it received. The film also represents an interesting shift in direction for Hughes, but one that paid off financially. While the storyline follows a familiar path and occasionally pushes the limits of plausibility, the sheer beauty of the imagery makes it easy to stay invested in the character's struggle to survive. Performances across the board are strong, including the wolf itself, and the central character is easy to root for. The haunting musical score adds atmosphere, but the true standout is the production design, paired with vast, breathtaking landscapes. I also appreciated the restraint shown with off-screen violence, letting the audience imagine much of the brutality. That said, it's troubling to hear that real animals were killed during production, something that feels unnecessary, especially in a film already relying heavily on digital effects. What surprised me most is not only that no one had previously made a movie focused on the domestication of wolves, but also that such a film was apparently needed in the first place. As a result, Alpha can feel somewhat redundant and very predictable, following a well-worn hero's journey. The trailer gives away quite a bit, and most plot developments unfold exactly as you'd expect. I'll admit my perspective might be colored by being more of a cat person than a dog person, despite being allergic to both. Visually, however, Alpha truly shines.